Good morning to everyone joining us from the United States. Good afternoon to those joining us from Europe and particularly from Croatia. And welcome to our audience from all over the world. My name is Fred Kemp. I'm the President and CEO of the Atlantic Council, speaking to you from our headquarters in Washington, D.C. It is my profound pleasure to welcome you to this Atlantic Council front page event, our premier platform for global leaders. Our guest today is the Prime Minister of the Republic of Croatia, Andrej Plenković. And thank you for joining us today, Mr. Prime Minister. There's a lot to talk about. Russia's unjustified and unprovoked war of aggression in Ukraine has challenged our assumptions about peace and stability on the European continent, highlighted the importance of unified Europe and of completing European integration. And of course, we're focused very much right now on President Biden's visit this week to Kiev. Under Prime Minister Plenković's leadership, the Republic of Croatia has provided critical support to Ukraine, has become a fully integrated member of the European Union by joining the eurozone and the Schengen area, and has taken on a leadership role in the region. And I think the joining of the eurozone, particularly, Mr. Prime Minister, is a very major accomplishment. Croatia's achievement of fully completing the process of European integration can serve as a source of hope for Ukraine. It is the unified ambition for membership that led to Croatia's success. And similarly, it is the unity of Ukrainians and transatlantic partners that proves to be key to Ukraine's potential success story. Croatia plays a key role in the Western Balkans by advocating for the region's Euro-Atlantic path. We hope to see Croatia continue to play a constructive role in helping advocate for a strong European engagement and foster dialogue among key actors across the Western Balkans. We at the Atlantic Council have long been committed to building a better future for Southern Europe, anchored in the broader transatlantic community through our Balkans Forward initiative. The Balkans Forward initiative is a coordinated effort to foster a democratic, secure, and prosperous Western Balkans, and it's led by our Europe Center and its Senior Director, Jörn Fleck, and his remarkable team. I am personally very much looking forward to this conversation and hearing about Croatia's perspective on how we can together seize this moment to help realize the vision of a Europe whole, free, and at peace. Please visit our website, atlanticcouncil.org, to learn more about our work in Southeast Europe and our Balkans Forward initiative. Now it's my pleasure to pass to Paula Dobriansky, an executive committee member of our board of directors and the former Undersecretary of State for Global Affairs. Paula, over to you to kick us off and to moderate this conversation.
Thank you so much, Fred. Appreciate the introduction. And thank you, Prime Minister Plenković, for joining us today. And we welcome everyone joining this conversation from around the world. I am Paula Dobriansky. I am on the board of the Atlantic Council. I'm also vice chair of the Scowcroft Center for Strategy and Security, and I'm very pleased to moderate today's discussion. First, I want to encourage all of you to get involved with the conversation online on Twitter by using hashtag AC front page and following the conversation at the Atlantic Council. And to those of you who are watching on Zoom, you may also ask your questions through the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. I look very much forward to welcoming the range of questions that will be coming in today. Now, Prime Minister Plenković, it's really a privilege to have you here with us today. Prime Minister Plenković has been Croatia's, literally the leading Croatian government since 2016, which makes him the longest serving prime minister in independent Croatia's history. And before holding that office, the prime minister served as a Croatian member of the European Parliament, during which time he was head of the delegation to the EU-Ukraine Parliamentary Association Committee and also vice chair of the European Parliament's Committee on Foreign Affairs. So let me dive in, Mr. Prime Minister. To start off, we are reaching a year mark since the start of the horrific, unjustified, and unprovoked Russian war in Ukraine. What is Croatia's perspective on the situation and this current moment of Russia's war in Ukraine, and especially its impact on the transatlantic community? And thank you again for being with us. We're very privileged to have you here this morning.
Thank you very much, Madam Dobriansky. Thank you, Mr. Kempe, for the invitation and for being in the position to be one of your guests in the front page of the Atlantic Council. We were just checking a little bit in our records. Last time that I was at the Atlantic Council was actually 7 years ago in February 2016, when I was the vice chair, as you said, of the Foreign Affairs Committee of the European Parliament, and also head of the European Parliament's delegation for relations with Ukraine. And I remember how good the conversations with the leading foreign policy experts were at the time. Today, I'm addressing you actually from Vukovar. Vukovar is a martyr city in Croatia, the one that has been most destroyed during the Homeland War back in 1991, a symbolical city of Croatia's freedom heroism during the Homeland War. And in a way, there are many parallels from Croatia with Ukraine today, from Vukovar with Mariupol, for instance. And that is why when you said what is the Croatian point of view on the current situation after 1 year of the brutal Russian aggression and invasion of Ukraine, I think it's very clear. My government was swift and in terms of clarity, very, very articulate in condemning the Russian aggression, in extending solidarity to Ukraine in all potential ways, in diplomatic terms, political, economic, financial, technical, humanitarian. We are hosting around 22,000 refugees from Ukraine on our soil, and they are well integrated. Children are going to schools due to the proximity of Slavic languages. It's even perhaps easier in a Slavic country than somewhere else. And of course, we have extended substantive military assistance to Ukraine over the past 12 months, and we shall continue to do so in the future. The tectonic changes for the global security architecture that started exactly tomorrow, a year ago, had incredible consequences. I think they happened in the context of a little bit of a repetitive scenario that we saw with the Olympic Games in China in 2008 and Russia's invasion at the time of Georgia. Last year, we had the Winter Olympics in China and ending the aggression against Ukraine starting in 2022. I think this is important for all of us, the Western leaders, as a lesson about recognizing the threats as they are for the international law, for the international security, for the global system of governance, and also to completely abandon the politics of naivete, as the French would say, which I think is now clearly demonstrated because the political consequences, economic, financial, energy for all of us, and not only for Ukraine, who has been the primary victim of this Russian aggression, where tens of thousands of people were killed, territories occupied, false referenda held, illegal annexations occurred, destroyed electroenergetic infrastructure, and life has been made very difficult for millions of Ukrainians for over a year. But for the rest of the West, I would say that we are in the position that every single policy that we were conducting was impacted by this weaponization of energy, of food, of consequences on inflation, on economic and social standards. And basically, my stake is the following. The key word is the sustainability. Sustainability of Ukrainians to resist, sustainability of Western assistance to Ukraine, and sustainability of the Western governments to live up to the challenges that we are faced with, which are prices of energy, inflation, food, and keeping the social cohesion in our countries. I think all these three sustainabilities together can only bring to a solution where Ukrainians eventually territorial integrity is respected and brutal Russian aggression is ceased.
Prime Minister, you raise a very, very important point about the issue of sustainability. Let me go on a few more questions on Ukraine and that very topic. How do you assess and gauge Europe's response to Russia's war? Do you feel that Europe as a whole is doing enough in this regard? And do you anticipate further sanctions being put into place, other kinds of measures? What's your view as to the current state of play in Europe as a whole?
Well, I think that the unity of when it comes to the European Union, if that is your question, and that is how I perceive it, is really unprecedented. We met, as you remember, immediately in the evening of the 24th of February last year in the format of the European Council. So we literally all took planes and flew to Brussels the same day when the aggression started. My government held a session the same day, and we already at the time extended support, and we prepared to give support to Ukraine. I think this really unprecedented unity and determination to act and help in all possible ways is unique. I've been in the international affairs for the last 3 decades. I can't recall of any remotely similar scenario and situation where international support was so strong as we have managed to assemble such a unified perspective of the European countries to Ukraine, which I think is fantastic, and it's really something that we should continue. I'm saying this also as a small footnote. If I remember the Croatian situation of 30 years ago, Croatia was actually defending itself without any arms. Everything that the Croatian military at the time managed to equip itself was due to the illegal imports, because we were facing the United Nations sanctions regime, and the basically the import of weapons was not allowed until much later. So this situation of support to Ukraine with 9 rounds and packages of sanctions, with financial support, with macro-financial assistance, with military support, humanitarian support, with constant political focus, every single meeting that we have been meeting in the last year at the highest level always started with Ukraine and Russia's aggressions in Ukraine, and it will continue. So from that point of view, when I look at what was happening in the past and I assess what happened over the past year, I think this was really a showcase of solidarity that we haven't witnessed before, and it will continue. I don't see any major nuances in the positions of member states that this main line of policy would change. On the contrary, I think it is being strengthened, and there is no prevalent tone of those in the public spheres of our countries who would try to divide the responsibility for the conflict a bit to one side and a bit to another. These are very minor voices and predominantly orchestrated from Moscow.
Croatia certainly has contributed very important humanitarian aid and military assistance to Ukraine in this very crucial and difficult time. Also, at the same time, I know just like a number of our countries, there are some domestic challenges. Let me ask you if you can put into context. I understand that the Croatian parliament has voted against joining the EU military mission in support of Ukraine. Can you address that and put that in context? What are the circumstances here?
Well, the context is relatively simple. There are political forces, parties in Croatia who are preparing themselves for the parliamentary elections, which are in a year and a half from today, and they're using every single opportunity to be against the government. For your listeners and everybody around, you should be aware that our parliament has 151 MPs. My majority is consisting of 77, so just above the threshold of 76. For decisions of this nature, we needed a 2/3 majority, which is 101 vote. What we obtained was 97, so we were lacking 4 votes. in order to pass this decision to participate in the EU military assistance mission to Ukraine. Basically, what we offered as a Croatian contribution to this mission was several Croatian officers participating in the headquarters and the operation of the mission, which will be taking place not in Ukraine, but physically in Poland and Germany predominantly. Sending of our trainers to those two countries to train the Ukrainian troops and receiving up to 100 Ukrainian soldiers on our soil. This is a very, very symbolic part of our military assistance to Ukraine that has been given so far. But those 54 who didn't want to support it bear that responsibility, and they shall carry it for a very long time. And we will not hesitate to remind them of the very bad historic choices that they made. So these are internal elements, but stay assured that the parliamentary majority, the government, the majority of reasonable politicians and people in Croatia are firmly with Ukraine and will continue to be like that.
Thank you. And as I began the question with Croatia's assistance is very much appreciated. It's significant, and it's certainly one that many have taken note of. Let me also congratulate you. I know that our President Fred Kemp did at the outset on the historic achievement for your country on entering the eurozone and also the Schengen area, and therefore completing the process of European integration. Could you speak to what your own expectations are for the Euro introduction in 2023?
Yes. Well, at the outset of my first mandate, which was back in autumn 2016, my objective was that Croatia should join two deeper integrations of the European Union, and one is the eurozone, the other one is Schengen area, the area of free movement without any border controls, and of course the eurozone is the having the common currency. We have performed reforms, we have worked hard, we have fulfilled our criteria, we have actually managed to be faster than the two countries that were a little bit ahead of us in this process, especially to Schengen. This is the political objectives of Romania and Bulgaria, who started to move towards Schengen 12 years ago. Bulgaria wanted to join also Eurozone before us, but we were firm. We had assured political stability. This is the key precondition. So in Croatia, the parliamentary majority consisting of the HDZ, which is my party, which is a center-right party, the minority members and the small liberal parties are the magic triangle that I think it's very useful and concretely delivering for Croatia. Kept the political stability, government did reforms. We explained to our partners in the Eurogroup, in the European Council, Commission, European Parliament that we have fulfilled all the criteria, and we are the only country so far that is a member of the European Union who joined both Eurozone and Schengen on the same day, which was on the 1st of January. Plus, we are now among the 15 countries in the world who are at the same time NATO, EU, Schengen, and Eurozone. So, in a span of only 3 decades, from a country which was not a subject of international law, meaning we were not even recognized, we managed to enter into this core group. So this was a strategic achievement, and I think that it will be very useful for the Croatian economy. It will be useful for the growth of our GDP, for the foreign investments, for the business climate. Croatia has, in my mandate, acquired also the investment credit rating according to all 3 credit rating agencies, meaning the Fitch, Moody's, and S&P. Never higher, never better. And the protection that we all get once we have also the European Central Bank behind us is very important. Croatia, on the level of security, when it comes to the illegal migration, and the challenges that are posed to Europe, especially on the Western Mediterranean and on the Eastern Mediterranean and the Western Balkans route, is cooperating in terms of police cooperation with the neighboring countries. We have 6,500 policemen on our borders. We have invested heavily into the surveillance of this border. Our option, and I'm emphasizing this, is not to build fences, walls, or barbed wires against or vis-a-vis the border with Serbia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, and Montenegro. On the contrary, we want to cooperate with their police forces in order to prevent illegal migration, because we don't want these physical barriers with our neighboring countries, especially when in many of them, like Bosnia and Herzegovina, Croats, for instance, live who are their constituent people, and we feel that would be a detrimental for our bilateral relations. But we would like to strengthen the external borders of the European Union, for instance, Turkey, Greece, Turkey, Bulgaria, so that there is no circulation of illegal migrants in an uncontrolled manner or excessive manner, as was the case in 2015 and 16. And at the same time, we invite our neighbors who are not yet members of the European Union to align their visa policy with the countries of risk that people fly into Sarajevo or Belgrade as tourists, and then basically through a green border go towards the west of Europe as illegal migrants. So Croatia will have a growth of in the last year above 6%. We managed to limit the inflation to 10.8, and we are now using all the benefits of the transformed and strengthened international economic, financial, and international political position.
Thank you for that very full answer. You have often advocated for a quote modern take on sovereignism, unquote, and as a kind of a key principle of statecraft, and in the context of the EU. Can you explain this principle a bit and how it has benefited Croatia, and what kind of role do you think that it can play elsewhere?
Yes, this notion of modern sovereignism, I'm speaking about it and explaining it to the Croatian interlocutors in a specific context. When you are a newly independent country and you are enjoying the prerogatives of a state, which you didn't have only 3 decades ago, meaning that people who are living in Croatia today knew how it was not to have our state, are very affectionate about sovereignism, about the state, about its independence, about influence, and let's say sometimes, and some of them wary of the impact of other actors into what we decide what we would like to do. My point was that joining NATO, joining the European Union, joining Schengen, and joining eurozone, by pooling part of our sovereignty to the supranational level, we have only become stronger. That is to say, more well protected, more influential globally, more influential on the European soil, and in a way realizing all of our national strategic objectives in a far more efficient manner that we would have done it without this integration. Not only by benefiting from the budgetary distribution of the European Union, when we are still very much a net beneficiary country, meaning that Croatia gets far more funds from European budget than we actually contribute, and that enables the government to invest in those areas which need catching up with the average level of development in the European Union. We need infrastructure, whether it's roads, whether it's bridges, whether it's railways, whether it's ecological or environmental protection infrastructure, such as agglomerations, elevating the living standards of our people. All of this has become a positive way to explain to the people, yes, you're sovereign, we are sovereign, we are on our own, we have our country, we have joined the club that can enable us to even develop faster and stronger and realize all of our strategic objectives in a far more efficient and financially easier manner than it would have been without this strong international positioning. So this has been the politics, the direction, the narrative, the explanation that I have been doing at home to various actors. Some people understand and appreciate, others less.
Thank you again for that very robust answer. We have a number of questioners, and I want to go to one of the first, Mr. Damir Marusic, who is editor of Washington Post Opinions. Damir, let me turn to you for your question.
Thank you, Paula. Mr. Prime Minister, thank you very much. As you mentioned, you've been a strong advocate for Ukraine since your time as an MEP. Croatia itself, having just achieved membership in Schengen and having adopted the euro, has also been a strong advocate for Ukraine's place in the European family. That is, it's supportive of its EU aspirations. But as we've seen in the case of the broader region, the broader Western Balkans, momentum for European enlargement has stalled. Many European leaders believe that enlargement is not a viable prospect until the EU gets its own house in order. So my question to you is this: how optimistic are you that the EU will manage to sort out its internal affairs so as to be able to absorb not only Ukraine, but also the countries of the Western Balkans that have been waiting for quite some time? And what do you think next steps are in this process of adaptation within the EU? Thank you.
Thank you for raising this perennial issue of deepening and widening of the European Union. We came into the European Union as the 28th member back in 2013. Actually, on the 1st of July, we will have the first 10th anniversary of our membership in the European Union. But today we are the 27th member, meaning that the Brexit and the United Kingdom's leaving of the club happened in the meantime, and the countries who are keen to join are literally all of our neighbors, the 6 countries of the Western Balkans, the 2 most advanced negotiating session already, thanks to the new methodology that was modified during the Croatian presidency of the Council in 2020, and the process was, as they say, clusterized compared to the chapters that existed before, Serbia on one side and Montenegro on the other. Finally, we've witnessed the last year decision to open accession negotiations with North Macedonia and Albania. Bosnia and Herzegovina, also due to our strong advocacy and support, and some other countries, of course, finally was granted a candidate status in December, and Kosovo, as you have seen, has applied for membership during the Czech presidency of the Council, meaning everybody is in some sort of form of the institutional pipeline. What has happened in the meantime? The Russian aggression against Ukraine has triggered the 3 countries of the so-called Eastern Partnership policy and neighborhood, and these were initially 6 countries. Now we have 3 who are really keen to join the EU, and one of them which has been suspended from the process, that is of course Belarus, while Armenia and Azerbaijan are not so keen to promote this policy of the membership of the European Union. So we have Ukraine and Moldova with a candidate status granted unconditionally in June and conditionally to Georgia. How do I analyze this new context? I think things are being accelerated. There is a strong political pressure coming, especially from Poland and Baltic countries, to move forward with Ukraine. I'm also very much keen that Ukraine goes further towards the membership of the European Union. They do have the partnership agreement, association agreement. Remember that Ukrainians are the only nation in the world who decided to lose their lives on the Maidan because of the association agreement. When I look at the Croat public, except experts, very few would remember we signed the Stabilization and Association Agreement in Luxembourg on the 29th of October 2001. So the point is that there is an acceleration, but there is also a sense of realism. There is no open door policy in a sense that all the criteria and the reforms needed will be suspended. Political signal of granting a candidate status was certainly useful, but now we need to see the dynamics of reforms and accompany the countries who wish to join in the process in the years ahead of us. You will have no one at the level of the European Council with the experience that we all have, whether it's through our own country's path or having seen the other countries who would dare to promise a date in the future. After the promises that were given to Poland, Czech Republic, and Hungary in the late 90s, no one dares to give any date in the future, but that we should work towards that direction is certainly the case. And Croatia will serve as a model, as an example. No one has more knowledge of the most recent accession process than we do, but also the political feeling and experience within the European Union and also in our neighborhood. So, remember that the EU membership is the only magnet, the only attraction, the only real source of transformative power and the political will to change in many, many, many of the policies which are not yet in the European Union at the European continent.
Damir, thank you for your question. Prime Minister, I'd like to now go to Maja Pisovic, who is calling in from Belgrade. She's a senior fellow, non-resident senior fellow with the Europe Center of the Atlantic Council. Maja, over to you.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Prime Minister, for being with us today. It means a lot to us. I have to say that we've been really encouraged to hear about your meetings with President Vučić in Davos at the sidelines and the meeting. But my question is, how do you see this relationship going forward? Is it going to become a trend of improving positive relations? Because I think that's really needed, not only for Serbia, but for the entire region. And you know, there's this prejudice in Serbia that you probably heard as well as I have, that, you know, even if we fulfill all the requirements from the European Union and get to the accession point, that Croatia will block Serbia. How do you address this issue, and how do you see this moving from here? How do you see your role in this process?
Yes.
And I'm asking this not only as an Atlantic Council fellow, but someone who spends all of my summers in Hvar. So I really appreciate your answer.
Oh, we have many connections then. My family comes from Hvar, as you may know. My father's side, plus I'm now in Vukovar, which means that we are not very far away. If you are in Belgrade, meaning that you completely understand the logic of where I am here today, given the events and the aggression against Croatia that was conducted by the Greater Serbian Milosevic regime at the beginning of the 90s, and has slowed down the process of European integration development and brought so many tragedies to not only Croats, but also many other nations in the area of the former Yugoslavia. Several points on relations with Serbia. First of all, you of course know, but perhaps others are not aware, that the policy of my government from the outset of 2016 was that in the parliamentary majority, we have 8 members of national minorities who are members of the Croatian parliament. Among those 8, you are aware that 3 of them belong to the Serbian minority and the Serbian political party in Croatia. And in my second mandate, the vice prime minister post in the Croatian government is actually held by now a young lady, Madame Šimpraga, as a member of the government representing minorities at the highest possible level, just one step below the prime minister. And this cooperation with minorities, including the Serbian minorities, was a very, very firm position of myself and my government, and I wanted to keep them on board, have them integrated. That I want that every single Croatian citizen, whether he's a Croat or whether he's a Serb or a Bosniak or Albanian or Roma or Italian or Czech or Hungarian, that they feel well in the Croatian society and that they can fulfill all of their rights adequately. When it comes to Serbia, you are aware that our relationship has been burdened by the events of 30 years ago. After our session now, I will now even go and visit an area near Vukovar where we are still looking for the remnants of the missing persons who died in the war of 30 years ago, so that there are many sensitivities. But we are determined to normalize our relations. The meeting which I had with President Vučić in Davos was certainly useful. In the meantime, our foreign ministers have met at 2 or 3 occasions. And what we would like to do is establish a list of issues where we can make progress in our cooperation, where we can help each other address the residual issues of the times of the 90s, but also increase our economic cooperation and trade. And I very much welcome that in the latest Serbian government, also the political representative of the Union of Croats in Vojvodina, Mr. Žigmanov, has become a minister in the Serbian government. And this is certainly a new element which didn't happen ever before. So this signal we read as also a gesture of goodwill from the side, from Belgrade, to improve our relations. So we shall be working together on a number of issues. I don't know about the prejudice that you said, but what you could see in the process so far, Croatia was not using many of, let's say, procedural possibilities to block processes. We refrained from that. We were stalled in our own integration process by some other countries, and according to certain calculations, lost at least 2 or 3 or even 4 years at a certain point due to the either bilateral relations or some other issues by some of the member states, and we were not very happy with the blockade as a concept. There were even initiatives in Croatia 6 months ago to block the accession of Finland and Sweden to NATO in our parliament because of the issue of the equality of the Croats in Bosnia and Herzegovina. My position was not to antagonize members of the same club, not to antagonize our neighbors, but to promote our interest in a cooperative, reasonable, sensible, diplomatic and political talks so that we arrive at the solutions which are good for attaining our own national interests, but also taking into account the wider context. So Croatia will be sober. We shall signal the need for improvement in many areas where we need improvement, whether it's the finding of the missing persons, whether it's many legacies of the war, whether it's the border issues, but all of those issues can be addressed along the process of integration. And therefore, this policy, I think, is the only reasonable one, and many experienced people in Croatia share the view that I have just suggested now.
Thank you, Maya, for your question, and good to see you today. Let's go to another question. We have Jorn Fleck, who is our Senior Director of the European Center at the Atlantic Council. Jorn, over to you.
Thank you, Ambassador, and thank you, Prime Minister, for joining us and for this interesting conversation. You recently expressed your support. We'll stay within the region. You recently expressed your support for the intensifying efforts by the European Union and the United States to bring about a normalization of relations between Kosovo and Serbia, and an end to that long-standing dispute between the two countries, which obviously has huge implications for the wider region. Why do you think the current effort, that Franco-German, now European proposal for normalization of relations is different? What potential does it have? And what role do you think Croatia can play in furthering and hopefully bringing those efforts to a successful conclusion?
Mm-hmm. Well, tomorrow will be the 15th anniversary of the day when Croatian government recognized the independence of Kosovo. 15 years, it's a long period. You know that there are 5 countries within the European Union who have not recognized yet Kosovo. This has certainly been an issue, an open issue in the process of the institutionalized relations between Kosovo and the European Union. What we have seen in the efforts of not only France and Germany, but also some other members of the Quint and the mediatory role of Miroslav Lajčák, a very experienced Slovak diplomat who is working under the auspices of Josep Borrell in the External Action Service of the European Union, is an attempt to move things forward, to, I would say, diminish tensions, which occasionally were happening, especially in the north of Kosovo, and try to go in the direction, the way I see it, is almost a de facto recognition, something that will certainly sooner or later be formally on the table. This is a way to move forward, to get away from the table issues which are constantly raising some tensions in the north of Kosovo. I believe that we, as the European Union, we need a stability in the region. We have enough of destabilization with Russia's aggression on Ukraine, and we should be very watchful and careful and vigilant about the stability in the Balkans, because there's the last thing that the West would need is another destabilization in the neighborhood, which has proved itself to be volatile over the past 30 years. So my impression is that there are more positive signals about these proposals recently than the immediate reaction after the proposal was presented to the two sides. This is the feeling I have from direct contacts with my colleagues, both at the high Serbian level and also Kosovo level. And we shall see, I think they're scheduled to meet again in a couple of days in Brussels. I think it's the end of February. So this is a process of talks ahead of us. We certainly support what two sides will finally accept and agree, especially in terms of stability and somehow opening the way of both of them towards the European Union, and also Kosovo, who wants to go faster than it has been the case so far.
Bjorn, thank you for your question. And Prime Minister, I'd like to just take a few minutes more. If we can, one last question. You really have been very generous with your time, and we're very appreciative of your being with us today. This particular question has come through the Q&A function, and there are many for you that we're not going to get to, but this is from Izmir Milavic, who happens to be the foreign affairs editor of N1 Bosnia and Herzegovina. And this is what Izmir asks. Mr. Prime Minister, you just had your first contact with the new Bosnian government. What do you expect from them, and what will your government do now for Bosnian EU and NATO path?
Well, I have been really strongly advocating the European path of Bosnia and Herzegovina for years in all my previous capacities, whether it was a member of the European Parliament, member of the Croatian Parliament, State Secretary for European Affairs, or 7 years as a Croatian Prime Minister. I actually assisted and facilitated the application for membership of the European Union, which Dragan Čović did in February 2016, also 7 years ago, and I think it was a great step forward, and now supported the granting of the candidate status. It's true, last week I welcomed for the first official visit the new president of the Council of Ministers of Bosnia and Herzegovina, Madame Borjana Krišto, who is a Croat, and yesterday actually we had a meeting with Mr. Konaković, who is the new foreign minister of Bosnia and Herzegovina, and we have agreed after these two meetings that we shall hold a joint session of the Croatian government and the Bosnia and Herzegovina Council of Ministers in Zagreb in June, in order to put at the table all the issues that we have. We have been one of the most important economic and trading partners with Bosnia and Herzegovina after Austria. Croatia is the second biggest investor. Croats are one of the three constituent peoples. We are building bridges over the river of Sava. We are cooperating in tourism, in energy, in infrastructure. Croatia would like to facilitate Bosnia and Herzegovina gasification. We have an LNG terminal at the island of Krk, and we want to invest into our gas pipeline so as to provide Bosnia and Herzegovina the so-called southern interconnection that would enable the Federation of Bosnia and Herzegovina, which is almost 50% of the territory of Bosnia and Herzegovina, to receive gas and thus secure the diversification of energy supplies. So our ambition is that Bosnia and Herzegovina's new Council of Ministers, new majority in political terms, agrees on the key deliverables which were clearly stated in the context of the candidate status. There were 8 of them in December, but there are also 14 conditions posed by the European Commission as a critical precondition, and that is to find an agreement on the electoral law, that all constituent peoples elect their own political legitimate representative in the country's presidency. This hasn't been the case with the Croats now for the 4th time, because we see the results of the elections. Even Madame Krišto, who was running for the job in the presidency as Croats politically suspended pluralism. They all supported one candidate, and they still didn't manage to elect her because of the votes that were given to Mr. Komšić. So this is an element that is actually complicating our relationship, but now that we have the new government from our side, we shall make a strong push in establishing very good relations between the two countries. And as I said, Croatia is the strongest, the most sincere friend, neighbor, and advocate of Bosnia and Herzegovina in the European Union that they will ever have, and we shall continue to do that because we think it's in our mutual interest, and we would like to strengthen our relationship, of course, with the whole country, with all the peoples that live there, Bosniaks, Serbs, and Croats most of all, but all the others as well.
Prime Minister Plenković, you, as I said, have been very generous with your time, and knowing that, as you indicated at the outset, you just delivered remarks in Vukovar, I might just mention that years ago, I had the gripping experience of going to Vukovar and know what it means for Croatia and all Croats. So we feel very privileged indeed to have some of your time this morning and really the very substantive deep dive you have had given us on all the questions. I'm only sad that I couldn't get to all the questions. There were quite a few that came in for you, but we're really grateful of your time, and it's very good to see you and to be with you this morning. Really, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Much appreciate your invitation. It's early afternoon here, so I wish you a good morning in Washington. And also thank you for this opportunity. Always a great pleasure to have a chance to speak at the events organized by the Atlantic Council.
Well, thank you again. And also thanks to all our viewers for joining us. This concludes our front page.
Thank you.